Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 270, Doorstep. Tan Tai, who understood that victory would prove hard for this battle. He spat a mouthful of saliva and cursed, "Son of a bitch, wily old fox. To think you would use such an underhanded trick." Unmoved by the cussing, Xiao Changbi looked at Tan Tai and continued, "By following you into battle, the soldiers are entrusting their lives to you. You have no chance of victory now. In resisting stubbornly, you are disregarding the safety of the soldiers. Tan Tai, this old one is a former acquaintance of your eldest brother, so let me advise you again to surrender and pledge allegiances to the side of the righteous." "Bullocks," Tan Tai said coldly as he rose with his blade. "I followed his lordship on a campaign to fight against the Bianchi cavalry, and yet you want me to surrender to you at the end of the day. Bah! This Tan Tai will not bow." The words had yet to be fully out of his mouth when Su Yu heard the whoosh of an arrow being released from the top of the watchtower. The whistling sound pierced through the darkness of the night, sounding particularly jarring on the ears. Su Yu, having long heard about the smooth passage of the Zongbo bridleway and great numbers of relay stations, guessed that Tan Tai was passing on the news with this one move. Su Yu immediately advised, "Viceroy Xiao, there is no time to lose. Let's make this a quick battle and get it over and done with. We treat you with compassion even though you insist on resorting to arms." Xiao Changbi gripped the hilt of his broadsword. "To catch the bandits, first capture their chief. Kill Tan Tai, and we will be able to score a victory without fighting tonight." The capital command troops had already swarmed in at the drop of his voice. The garrison troops were too powerless to resist and could only cut a wretched sight as they fled. Yu Xiaozhe saw that Tan Tai was in no position to do a thing without support. Just as he was about to be surrounded, a few partridge cries suddenly rang out from outside the camp. Partridges! Where on earth were there partridges in Zongbo? Right at that time, in the very instant Xiao Changbi drew out his new broadsword, Yu Xiaozhe covered his head and shouted, "Lao Hu, roll!" Tan Tai, originally did not want to roll, but at the very moment he was about to lunge forward, he felt a pain in the back of his knee and his entire body went down with a thud, his face to the ground. Before he could steady himself, he heard the military tent at the side collapse with a thunderous boom, smashing right into the capital command troops in front. The catapult. Tan Tai subconsciously thought it was the Bianchi cavalry, but then he thought the better of it and exclaimed with an overjoyed expression, "The Imperial Army!" With the light from the flames, Su Yu saw soldiers surging out from the eastern side of the camp and could not help but curse "Damn it," to himself. The firelight outside the camp suddenly intensified. The Imperial Army had even brought along the catapult from the Tse province armory. They had been waiting for a long time just to seize the opportunity to fight the capital command troops tonight. In the twinkling of an eye, the tables had turned. Xiao Changbi wanted to withdraw his troops, but the retreat route in the back had already been intercepted and severed. "Viceroy Xiao," Su Yu said to Xiao Changbi, "we have played into their hands." The collapsed military tent knocked over the torches, and sparks abruptly shot up. The capital command troops' light cavalry were only a few hundred in number. As they hastily retreated, they bumped into the Imperial Army that had come circling around to their backs. Tan Tai looked as if he had seen his dear mother the instant he saw the Imperial Army. He propped himself up and rose to his feet, crying out with joy, "Bloody hell, Qiaotianya!" Upon hearing this name, Xiao Changbi looked back in the firelight. A few strands of white hair from his slightly loosened bun fell, blocking the sight of his blinded eye. His vaguely hunched back was not at all strapping tall, but it looked like a steep, protruding hill in the color of the night. "Uncle Xiao!" Qiaotianya's blade-gripping hand slid down, where it rested on the hilt of a sword that was not easily drawn. After a moment's pause, he continued, "Shifu." The past materialized in that very instant, but in just a split second, it dissolved away into the long, endless night. Qiao Tianya was at the age of 4 when he acknowledged Xiao Changbi as his master. This sword that he had brought along when he left Chu capital had also been a gift from Xiao Changbi. Xiao Changbi did not have a sword. He slowly drew out that brand new broadsword of his and looked at Qiao Tianya as he proclaimed in a hoarse voice, "Traitors ought to be executed." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Huo Lingyuan galloped through the starry wilderness, speeding through the lush expanse of grass as he rushed in the direction of Deng province. At the foot of the city wall, he raised his authority token high and bellowed, "Open the gates." The Deng province overhanging gate slammed down with a thunderous bang, and Huo Lingyuan galloped across the passageway, dismounted his horse, and sprinted up the city wall. He grabbed over the torch at the side and thrust it before him to illuminate the way ahead, gasping heavily for breath as he drove away the darkness. The Tianfei watchtower mountain chain was still and silent in the pitch-dark night. The Qidong garrison troops mentioned in the urgent report were nowhere to be seen. Huo Lingyuan asked the general guarding the city, "Any activity from the smoke signal towers?" "All as usual," the general guarding the city answered. Huo Lingyuan's back was all soaked from speeding all the way over. He wiped the sweat off his face with a palm and returned the torch to the general guarding the city. "Be on your guard," he commanded. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Dark clouds hid the moon from view and the stars faded away. All good things were gone in a flash, fleeting and ephemeral. Sparks flew all over as broadsword and sword collided. The victor was decided at the moment when Xiao Changbi fell off his horse. His broadsword was broken, as were his master-disciple ties with Qiao Tianya. The camp was illuminated by the collapsed and pinned down torches. The footsteps of the capital command troops were in disarray. They were no match for the imperial army, who were masters at combat on foot. Xiao Changbi, too, was no match for Qiao Tianya. Qiao Tianya was only a few steps away from Xiao Changbi. His sword returned to its sheath under the firelight, and a disarray of overlapping shadows shrouded the side of his body. In his trance, he actually bore some resemblance to the Xiao Changbi who drew his broadsword earlier. "Defeat is certain in this battle," Qiao Tianya said softly under the crackling sound of the fire. "Shi Fu is not here to crush me." With his hand covering his chest, Xiao Changbi struggled to gasp for his dying breath. His pale lips opened and closed. "I'm already at this age. I'm no longer as valiant as I was in those days. I came to see you." "Your father erred." Xiao Changbi tried his best to open his eyes wide as he gazed at the blurry canopy of heaven. "And so have I. With this battle, I've repaid the debt, on your father's behalf." Shen truly lives up to the grand mentor's words. Qiao Tianya looked at Xiao Changbi. But Xiao Changbi would not look at Qiao Tianya. His hoarse voice was just like a drum that had been broken. In the last lingering moments of his life, he murmured, "Qiao Sanjiu. A fine lad." Qiao Tianya tightened his grip on the hilt of the sword. He stood unmoving and still in the entire sky of flying ashes and let the dust settle upon him, his shoulders cutting a sorry sight. The day he went to the Xiao's residence to acknowledge Xiao Changbi as his master, Xiao Changbi had patted the top of his head and said the exact words, "Qiao Sanjiu. A fine lad." Tan Taihu, who was on the other end dragging the bodies, whistled at Qiao Tianya and tossed over the firearms they had just seized. Other than the dozen or so equipped by the light cavalry, Tan Taihu's expression was odd. The others are all malfunctioning. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Qi Zuyan stood before the Tianfei watchtower's beacon tower and overlooked the winding mountain range. This night was just like a rising tide, trapping not only her but also Qidong. She had stood here alone countless of times before, watching over the 5 commanderies. Seeing her lonely back, Qi Wei could not stop himself from calling out, "Commander-in-Chief." At this call, Qi Zuyan thought of her conversation with Hua Xianji before she set off. Hua Xianji sat upright opposite her, the white Huadian at her temple hidden among hair the color of raven black, as if floating open on the crystal clear water surface. It was not as conspicuous as the lady herself, but it gave her charm quite a boost. As she brewed the tea, she said, "Looks like success or failure hinges on this one move, given how Chu Capital is pressing you so urgently." Qi Zuyan watched her steep tea, her feminine dainty hands holding up the clay teapot. Strangely enough, as long as Hua Xianji was there, all the strife outside seemed to have vanished. Hua Xianji could always quite manage to make Qi Zuyan think of the pleasure of rouge. "I saw that your entire army is ready to depart, so I thought of having another cup of tea with you." "Tea to send me off?" Qi Zuyan asked. As boiling water poured over the tea leaves, wisps of steam spiraled into the air. "Tea to make you stay," Hua Xianji said. The tension in the atmosphere turned up a notch. Qi Zuyan braced herself by the side of her knees, looking as if she was going to get up. By mobilizing troops, Commander-in-Chief Qi means to obstruct Shenzhequan from advancing west so that he will stay put in Zongbo and not enter into conflict with the Li clan. But if you ask me, Commander-in-Chief Qi is merely deceiving yourself with this one move, much like the thief who plugs his ears when stealing a bell. Not only is it of no benefit to the common people, Hua Xianji nudged the tea gently over to the other end of the small table and looked at Qi Zuyan, it also deviates from Commander-in-Chief Qi's original intent. Qi Zuyan stopped mid-action. The emerald window gauze reflecting the banana leaves blocked out some of the sunlight, making Hua Xianji look like she was sitting in a painting. She said to Qi Zuyan, "Food is scarce in Chu Capital, and the 8 cities' granaries are empty. You were unwilling to follow Xiao Qi eastward because deploying troops into war would make it hard for the common people, but how is your aid towards the Li clan now any different from sending troops? The cage of the noble clans is already broken. Chu Capital is now at the time when they are filtering out all that is inferior and worthless." Qi Zuyan decided to speak frankly. Great Zhou still has the opportunity to turn things around. But once Shenzhequan's troops enter Chu Capital, this opportunity will be forfeited. "I know best the 8 cities' accounts," Hua Xianji said. "The opportunity Commander-in-Chief Qi speaks of is not an opportunity for Great Zhou or the common people in the world, but merely for the emperor." Qi Zuyan was slightly taken aback. The legitimate lineage of the Li clan's bloodline has long since been severed with Li Jianheng. I do not recognize who the one sitting on the imperial court right now is. When my aunt was still alive, she often said Li Jianting bears a striking resemblance to Emperor Guangcheng, but Xue Xiaozuo insisted that she is Prince Jin's daughter. There is one thing mentioned in Zongbo's diatribe that is true. If this woman is really a legitimate descendant of Prince Jin, then why doesn't Xue Xiaozuo produce the precious proof from Prince Jin? Since he is so certain, why not show the proof to convince the entire world, too? When Emperor Xiand was still on the throne, he addressed Hua Xianji as third younger sister. Everything she used was purchased in accordance with protocols meant for an imperial princess. Even Li Jianheng had to respectfully address her as elder sister. Li Jianting ought to have called her Gugu, the address for a paternal aunt. If there was anyone else in the world who could verify Li Jianting's identity now that the Empress Dowager was dead, it was Hua Xianji. Hua Xianji continued in a soft voice, "If the female emperor lacks legitimacy, then how can Commander-in-Chief deem herself loyal?" Qi Zuyan clenched the teacup. Ripples began to form on the surface of the tea. "If she can achieve peace and stability for the common people, then my helping her is loyalty. If that's the case, Commander-in-Chief Qi might as well assist Shenzhequan rather than Li Jianting." Hua Xianji finally showed her mettle amidst her gentle words. However, she swapped back her address of Qi Zuyan. "Ayin, you and Xiao Jiming are friends who have been through adversity together, and you and Lu Guangbai are former superior and subordinate. If you assist Li Jianting, these two men will have to draw their blades against you, and you against them. This is the first reason. Shenzhequan and Xiao Qi jointly administer military and political affairs in the northeast. Shenzhequan's withdrawal of troops when you attack Deng province is a minor matter, but Xiao Qi's military defeat is a major issue. A military expedition afar is arduous. Without Shenzhequan, the 90,000-strong armored cavalry will undoubtedly be defeated. Should the Bianchi cavalry stage a comeback at that time, the common people in the three regions to the east would still have to face this menace. Your loyalty today is to make the expectant common people in the three regions suffer again. This is the second reason. Li Jianting conferred the noble title of Prince of Dongli on you not out of gratitude but because she was forced by the situation. It is often said that water brims only to overflow, the moon waxes only to wane. Let's say you really quell the rebellion in Zongbo. Once Chu capital settles down, Qidong will be crowned with illustrious military service, but there will be no Libe to mutually hold Qidong in check. Since she can make you a prince today owing to the situation, then she can also be forced by circumstances someday to strip you of your conferred title. This is the third reason. Yao Wenyu serves under Shenzhequan's command, and with his eloquence, spurred all the talents in the world into swarming over to Zongbo. Shenzhequan not only entrusted heavy responsibilities to the former Chu capital minister, Yu Xiaozhe, but also promoted the former advisor of the enemy's forces, Gao Zhongxiang. He does not let family status and past history prejudice him as he leads the advisors under this command to push ahead with the census registry. In just 1 year, he has already rooted out the bandits in Zongbo and created the world's grains hub. Given how he has acted with magnanimity in Zongbo thus far, he will similarly be able to accommodate the competent ministers on the imperial court when his troops enter Chu capital. This is the fourth reason. Hua Xianji gently held up the white flower at her temple and said slowly, everything that Li Jianting can do, Shenzhequan can do it, too. However, Li Jianting might not necessarily be able to do everything that Shenzhequan can do. These four arguments made complete sense, whether for personal or public reasons. Like a slap to the head, it shattered Qi Ziyuan's loyalty to pieces. However, this was still not enough. Hua Xianji's slender fingers that were holding the flower formed a contrast with the eastern pearl on her ear. She still looked wan and sallow, her expression several shades downcast. She spoke slowly and unhurriedly. Ayin, the secretariat elder, once said that men who wield brushes die in remonstrations, while men who wield swords die in battles. But look, in these 20 years of political storms, how many of them are able to die worthy deaths? Han Cheng wanted to support a boy of his own clan into becoming the emperor, but the world wouldn't let him. It's not out of loyalty to the Li clan but because the Han clan was immoral and was thus unworthy of the throne. Great Zhou's internal and external strife are endless, and the one who can truly end this all has long since ceased to be Li Jianting. Shenzhequan improves the lives of the people so that they thrive. He has just cause, and he has the respect and support of the people. He is the hope of all in the world. She slowly raised her eyes to gaze at Qi Ziyuan, as if she was gazing at the stabilizing force that would determine the rise and fall of the empire. Her gaze held both admiration and heartache. And now, the lives and deaths of the people all lie in this one decision of yours. The thick mist from the tea dispersed amongst the window lattice. After contemplating it for a long time, Qi Ziyuan asked Qi Wei, 100 years later, will anyone still remember Qi Ziyuan? They will. Qi Wei suddenly choked up with emotions. With this move, the commander-in-chief will fulfill the wishes of all in the world. From now on, the people will live in peace, and the great cause will be accomplished. Who wouldn't remember Qi Ziyuan? My name cannot be recorded into history, and my memorial tablet cannot be served with offerings. This is also a violation of the Qi clan's ancestral teachings. I am, in truth, a traitor of Great Zhou. Qi Ziyuan gazed at the landscape. After my passing, I will be a pile of yellow earth, a handful of sodden mud. With his hand on his blade, Qi Wei kneeled and said, if Commander-in-Chief Qi passes and I am still alive, I will lay offerings before the Commander-in-Chief's memorial tablet. If I'm not, then my sons, grandsons, and generations after generations of my family shall light that everlasting altar lamp for the Commander-in-Chief. Qi Ziyuan looked back and smiled. In that case, It's all worth it. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The location of Dan City was close to Chu capital. All the imperial court officials in the capital city were on tenterhooks. Mingli Hall was brightly illuminated, and the side hall was full of people. The moment the military report came in, everyone listened carefully with rapt attention. "What is the update on the battle?" Li Jianting asked. Replying to Your Majesty, the back of the military officer kneeling before the door was all drenched in sweat as he gasped heavily for breath. The 20,000 capital command troops fell for the rebel troops' trap, and Viceroy Xiao was caught in a heavy siege. "How about the Prince of Dongli?" Kong Qiu stood up. The military officer wiped his sweat and answered, "The news of the Prince of Dongli's mobilization of troops is actually false. Qidong's 300,000 strong garrison troops have not moved at all." The teacup in Sen Yu's hand clattered to the ground. A sudden uproar broke out in the side hall. All the eunuchs and palace maids present were thrown into a panic. "What about the remaining capital command troops?" Shueziaozuo asked. "Transfer them back immediately." Chen Zhen reacted swiftly and strode a step out to say in an urgent tone, "Transfer the remaining capital command troops back to Chu capital immediately." "Hold on," Shueziaozuo suddenly spoke up. He looked at the military officer and said in a low voice, "When the capital command troops are being transferred back, issue the tally of urgency to Juexi, He province and Huai province. Say that the rise and fall of the nation all hinges on this moment. Whoever can deploy troops to aid Chu capital, the imperial court will reward them with 1,000,000 taels. 1,000,000 taels. With such a heavy reward, there were bound to be brave men stepping forward. Shueziaozuo was already forced to a dead end. The riot in Huai province had yet to stop, and there were still leftover bandits in He province. With this move, he was dangling the key to the Shi clan's money vault at the city gates of Chu capital. Shenzhequan was not invincible without the assistance of the Libai armored cavalry. Whoever could tilt the scale in their favor at this moment would become the next power of Great Zhou. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 271, Huilian. Qizuyan has really turned traitor. Sen Yu was in disbelief. The Qi clan has guarded Qidong for a century. With this move, she's destroying Qidong's 100 years of prestigious reputation overnight. Rulers of Great Zhou was surnamed Li. They could remonstrate with their sovereign and die for their sovereign, but they could acknowledge no one else other than the Li clan as their sovereign. Huazianji said that the people did not want the descendant from the Han clan because of the Han clan's immorality. That was a pretext. The ministers who really stood in the imperial court were all ministers of the Li clan. Without the Li clan, they would all be officials of a former dynasty. If the emperor was bad, he could be changed, but he had to be surnamed Li. This was legitimacy. Otherwise, why would Huilianji remonstrate with his death? Why would Shueziaozuo do his utmost to such an extent? Wouldn't it be better for them to switch allegiances to another master and declare Libai as the king? Centuries of the so-called loyalty all rested on this one surname. Overstep that boundary and they would be treacherous traitors and despicable scums who violated the ethics of social order. So they ran around shouting with arms raised, doing all they could. What they wanted was a resurgence of the Li clan's Great Zhou, not to kneel to another master. Gao Zhongxiang rose to fame, but even when Chu capital read his articles, they still spat on him and cursed him. This was because he was a turncoat. To betray his original master was to be disloyal. A minister stood by loyalty. If he could not even stay loyal to his master, what kind of an official was he? He was merely a beast in human clothing. Yao Wenyu was renowned all over the world for his talents, and yet the virtuous talents he sought for Shenzhequan were mostly recluses from the countryside. Those that came from Chu capital were few and far between. When the Imperial Academy discussed him, they lamented him for being a talent led astray and cursed him for turning his back on his former teacher's legacy. Lianji remonstrated to his death to protect the legitimacy of the throne, and yet he went to serve Shenzequan, whose origins lack integrity. He threw in his lot with the traitor, and for that, he had long been disdained by these Confucian scholars at the core of the great Zhou Empire. He was no longer that unimpeachable, unpolished jade of yesteryear. Tears coursed down Kong Qiu's face at the way things were now. He sighed, "It is I who have misjudged Qi Ziyin. Why was Xiao Chengbi so easily defeated?" Chen Zhen collapsed into his chair. He even took away the firearms from the Chunquan battalion. ******. Shenzequan ascended the stairs. Dawn had yet to break, and mist was rolling at the campground they were originally stationed. He could already get a clear look at Dan City. "It's getting cold." Fei Sheng followed behind him, holding the overcoat for Shenzequan. "Master, watch out for the chills." Thin frost condensed amongst the mud. Jiao Tianya, Tan Taihu, and the few of them crossed over with their blades in tow as they followed the prefectural lord up. Tan Taihu had just made another trip to the lavatory, and his face was ghastly pale as he kneeled to pay his obeisances to Shenzequan. After greeting your lordship, he consciously felt ashamed. "You did well beating them at their own game." Shenzequan looked askance at him. "Once second master is back, you'll be rewarded." Tan Taihu's face flushed red. This is because of your lordship's thorough planning. I didn't expect a spy amongst the troops." He did not want credit that was not his to begin with. Pointing at Yu Xiaozhe at the side, he continued, "It's all thanks to Yu Jing for being quick-witted." "Then you might as well thank Ding Tao," Yu Xiaozhe teased. "He was the one who struck the back of your knees and sent you sprawling for cover." At other times, Jiao Tianya would have said something to poke fun at him, but today, he looked depressed as he stood by the side and said nothing. "How did your lordship guess that there was a spy among the troops?" Tan Taihu inquired. "Weren't you the one who told me that?" Shenzequan asked him in reply. He was in a good mood today. "You set off for Duan province when you heard that Wang Xian had arrived at Duan province. How would you have the guts to do so in the past? Not unless there was someone else instigating you." Tan Taihu admired Xiao Qiye the most, and he feared Xiao Qiye the most, too. Although he was headstrong and obstinate, he wholeheartedly yielded to second master. If there was no one dropping hints in his ears, then given his frank and blunt nature alone, the thought that Wang Xian would lodge a complaint against him would never have occurred to him. "The only question is whether this spy," Yu Xiaozhe said, "is a spy from Chu capital or Biancha." "I wasn't sure at first," Fei Sheng said. "But from what he did last night, he is clearly a spy from Chu capital." "No," Jiao Tianya suddenly piped up. "The spy hiding among the troops is definitely not sent by Chu capital." The rest turned back to look at Jiao Tianya, who continued, "If he was sent by Chu capital, the capital command troops would not have been completely in the dark. Even Uncle Xiao was unaware." "Your lordship, there's something suspicious about this matter. Second master is in the midst of pressing in towards Amuer. If Amuer had arranged to plant a scorpion here, he would definitely not use laxative but lethal poison. That way, the garrison troops will be no match for the capital command troops. Once Tse province is in danger, second master will withdraw his troops and return to provide reinforcement. Only then will Amuer's crisis be averted." Xiao Qiye had already arrived at Mozanchuan, where he was relying on the Huiyan tribe to win over the three tribes to form a mutual frontier trade market alliance and prepare to attack Amuer together. Amuer's vanguard, Huhlu, and chief general, Hassan, had all died in battle. At present, he was a trapped beast. If he wanted to break out of the encirclement, killing off the Dun province garrison troops would be the most convenient option. Tan Taihu, being the artless person he was, said offhandedly, "Then who else can it be? It can't be our own people in Zongbo, can it?" An innocuous remark on the speaker's part, but not so on the listener's end. The gears turned in Yu Xiaozhe's mind, but he did not dare to continue from where Tan Taihu left off. Were someone to say that there were no factions in Zongbo, they would be speaking of an impossibility. When Shenzhequan was in Tse province in the early days, the advisors under Zhou Gui's command clashed for this exact reason. To date, officials who held key positions in Zongbo belonged to one of two categories. The first was local officials in Zongbo that Shenzhequan promoted, and the second was former ministers of Great Zhou who came to throw in their lots with Shenzhequan. Although they sat on equal footing with the officials from the 6 prefectures, everyone's interpersonal relationships in private differed, as were their purposes for serving the prefectural lord. Between them, a boundary line existed. Yu Xiaozhe studied under Sen Yu, who was a major official of the Grand Secretariat. He came to Zongbo to meditate for peace, but in the end, he did not leave owing to his own selfish desire to follow and serve the prefectural lord. Shenzhequan treated him well and entrusted him with the heavy responsibility of conducting inspection tours. He traveled around the 6 prefectures to supervise and inspect the government administration, and it was inevitable for him to have friction with others. However, this had not deteriorated to the point where they mutually fought each other, because he did not manage the government affairs of a prefecture, had no soldiers in his command, and reported directly to Shenzhequan. Shenzhequan could dismiss him at any time he so wished. The one who really upset the balance was Wang Xian. Wang Xian was a criminally charged official who was relegated out of the capital, yet he still had direct jurisdiction over the key economic affairs of the 6 prefectures. He really gave Luomu hell when he was in Cha province. Speaking of the spy, Shenzhequan asked Tan Taihu, has he been caught yet? The troops were in disarray last night. Tan Taihu looked back at the squad in the distance. We still aren't done with the count yet. Your lordship, the firearms we seized this time are all malfunctioning. Shenzhequan had only just learned of this matter. With a slight frown on his face, he asked, malfunctioning? Qiao Tianya eased over to Shenzhequan and reminded him under his breath, that batch of firearms from King Yi of Fan province. There are a total of 135. Of the Great Zhou's 8 great training divisions, only the Chunquan battalion was equipped with blunderbuss. Back then, when Xiao Qiye wanted it, it was only by virtue of his relationship with Li Jianheng that he could get his hands on them to fiddle with. Firearms were restricted by the Ministry of War, and even the Ministry of Works did not have its blueprint, so it was very difficult for one to get leaked out. Shenzhequan did not manage to get his hands on one either when he was in the Jinyi Wei. The number of firearms was limited. Excluding the damaged ones in the armory, there were less than 200 in total. Shenzhequan said in a quiet voice, have you checked the serial numbers? Qiao Tianya nodded. Uncle Xiao brought along 150 firearms. They have the same numbers as the ones Huo Lingyun handed in. No wonder they were malfunctioning. The real firearms had made their way into Shenzhequan's hands a long time ago. Shenzhequan was slightly stunned. Reacting swiftly, he said, the Ministry of War had the firearms blueprint and the key to Chunquan Battalion's armory stored away. If Chen Zhen was the one who swapped them out, he would not have handed them to Xiao Changbi, and Xiao Changbi would not have been able to deploy troops. He looked at Qiao Tianya. In the blink of an eye, many thoughts occurred to him. Xiao Changbi knew that this batch of firearms had been swapped, yet he insisted on sending his troops and coming over to send himself to his death, because opportunity. If Shenzhequan wanted to send his troops into Chu capital, he needed to have an opportunity. The Grand Mentor wanted me to conceal myself amongst the Jinyi Wei to wait for your lordship. Qiao Tianya's eyes were pitch black. In the indenture he gave to your lordship, there was no mention of my surname or birthplace. Qi Huilian only wrote the word Sanjiao. In that case, other than me, Qiao Tianya said calmly and steadily, is there another name Feng Quan? Raindrops pitter-pattered down between Shenzhequan's brows, and the strong wind suddenly came sweeping over, wiping out the smoke in the camp. In the twinkling of an eye, A rainstorm came pouring down in torrents. Fei Sheng shook the overcoat open to shield Shen Zequan from the rain. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Should there came a day when you and I both lose our lives in the midst of this, the arrangement today will be the killer move that will preserve his life. Qi Huilian hugged his legs as he sat under the eaves and watched the torrential rain pour. He set down the empty wine gourd and grinned at an oblivious Ji Gang beside him. You gifted him Yang Shan Shui. I'll give him Shi Jun Dao, the blade of regicide. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 272, Twist. Raindrops pelted the military tent. Tea was boiling on the stove. Having already changed his clothes, Shen Zequan sat in the chair and asked Ji Gang, "Does Shifu know Feng Quan?" "Yes." Ji Gang held the teacup in hand and glanced at Jiao Tianya at the side. "But I had no idea he's Xiao Changbi's son, much less knew that Xiao Changbi was selling steamed buns at the entrance of the Temple of Penitence." When the Grand Mentor said back then that he was going to do this, he only said that Feng Quan was an informer. Since he is Xiao Changbi's son, Shen Zequan wondered, how did he become Miro's younger brother? Ji Gang held the tea in his mouth before swallowing it a while later. "Do you still remember that night when we entered the Temple of Penitence?" The Grand Mentor said that the Eastern Palace suffered countless casualties, injured and dead, among its subordinates. It occurred to me at that time that since the Grand Mentor could feign insanity to survive, there must be several others from the Crown Prince's faction who could have also slipped through the net to survive, too. I asked the Grand Mentor later, but he wasn't willing to speak of it, until one day, I chatted with the palace eunuch who came every month to deliver food and heard that Prince Chu, Li Jianheng, was fond of beauties and was racking his brains to scout for them in the local regions. Ji Gang told Qi Huilian about it as a joke, and several months later, Li Jianheng sent Miro from the manor in Jin City to Chu capital. I inquired with the Jin Yue. They said that Miro was raised and trained in the manor since she was a child, and she barely even saw her younger brother once every 5 or 6 years. Feng Quan was able to follow her into Chu capital because their former family house was burned down, and he had nowhere to go except to seek refuge with his older sister. Ji Gang set down the tea bowl and said with a serious expression, "I believed it to be true. You saw it too in Chu capital. That Miro really treated him as her younger brother. Who could tell that this was a sham?" Before Li Jianheng could take Miro into his residence upon her arrival in Chu capital, Xiaofu Sui seized the opportunity to offer her to Pan Rugui. Miro was very much favored and pampered by Pan Rugui, and subsequently, Feng Quan got into Pan Rugui's good graces. However, he was still not Pan Rugui's grandson at that time, because Pan Rugui still had a Xiaofu Sui by his side. On the eve of the Dragon Boat Festival in the 8th year of the Xian era, the Grand Mentor devised a plan to kill Xiaofu Sui. You know of this incident too. I thought that the Grand Mentor just wanted to get you out of the temple, Ji Gang said, but who would expect a Xiao Qiye to interject himself midway through? When Shen Zequan thought to this point, he suddenly remembered that not long after being released from the Temple of Penitence, when he was in the Jin Yue looking after the elephants, Xiao Qiye intercepted him to demand his thumb ring back, suspecting that he had planted a spy around Li Jianheng. A natural-born talent. That was how Qi Huilian praised Xiao Qiye. Because his sense of smell was too keen. With just his understanding of Li Jianheng alone, he sensed that someone was instigating Li Jianheng to fight for Miro. However, Xiao Qiye also did not expect that Shen Zequan was not at all the person who planted the person by Li Jianheng's side. He pitted himself against Shen Zequan, only to turn up empty-handed for it. Qi Huilian, however, had not exposed a single trace at all. This acuity of Xiao Qiye was simply astounding. After Feng Quan was sent in, Ji Gang said, the Grand Mentor never mentioned him again. The sound of drumming rain on the roof of the tent slightly underscored the quietness in the interior of the tent. Hanu was lying in Yao Wenyu's lap, So Yao Wenyu did not feel cold. He broke the silence. If it's him. If it's Xiao Fengquan, why did Xiao Changbi bring along the firearms? Shen Zequan propped up his head with his left hand, his train of thoughts running along smoothly in the warm tent. Xiao Changbi knew the firearms were replaced to give to the Fan province bandits. He understood that this batch of firearms are not usable, but he still brought them along. Xiao Changbi came to meet death in the face, all to give Shen Zequan a reason to attack Dan City. He had hundreds of ways at his disposal. He did not need the firearms to further compound the issue unless this batch of firearms was not meant to be used at all. Qiao Tianya, who had been leaning back in his chair, abruptly sat upright. After a moment of silence, he said, "Uncle Xiao is trying to tell your lordship who the scorpion is." The firearms were given to King Yi by the scorpion in Zongbo, and this scorpion in Zongbo got them from the scorpion in Chu capital. Chen Zhen could transfer the firearms around, and he held the blueprint in hand, but strangely enough, he had totally no knowledge of the loss of firearms from the Chun Quan battalion. The one who has eyes and ears everywhere is none other than a eunuch. A strange feeling overcame Shen Zequan. Some of the matters he had been clear on began to blur, while those that had been obscured started to clear up. Lu Guangbai told me that the one who swapped out the Bianjun commandery's military grains is the army supervising eunuch, Ying Shi. If that is the case, then Fu Man is a scapegoat, Yao Wenyu said, and Shui Yanqing is a shield. This blade, Shen Zequan's brows creased in a slight frown, is a little inscrutable. *****. Where exactly are you from? Shui Ziozhuo squatted before Fu Man and examined Fu Man's expression. After all the brutal tortures, Fu Man was only left with a layer of skin. He had no tongue, and could only glare at Shui Ziozhuo with bulging eyes as he opened and closed his lips. Behind Shui Ziozhuo, Yair attempted to stuff the paper and brush he was holding into Fu Man's hands, but all 10 of Fu Man's fingers were broken. He was already a disabled person on the last legs of his life. Shui Ziozhuo did not expect the scorpions to move this fast. This was simply the same as the time they forsook Weihuigu back then. He stood up and said, "You are a eunuch who entered the palace during the reign of Yanji, who has served Emperor Guangcheng. Later, Pan Rugui died and Xiao Qi recommended you during the public ditches case. Only then did you start to make your mark. Subsequently, you sent your godson, Ying Shi, to Qidong to supervise their army and indicated for him to switch the Bianjun commandery's military grains. You meant to make the Bianjun commandery suffer a defeat and open up the Qidong's line of defense for Amu'er." Gurgling sounds rang out from Fu Man's throat. He touched the chains with whatever was left of his fingers and lay on the ground with his eyes staring unblinkingly at Shui Ziozhuo. Military and political changes were bound to be inextricably linked. Back then, after the military defeat case, Hai Lianji and the other court ministers noticed the aberration in Great Zhou. Since the beginning of the Yanji reign, they were fighting tooth and nail with the noble clans, stuck in a stalemate between the collision of two powers. But after the military defeat case, the situation no longer developed in the way that either party could predict. The one who unmasked his true nature and gave himself away was Hua Saiqian. He was too overly flustered when Hai Lianji was chasing down the accounts, and colluded with the Biancha cavalry to ink a debt of blood in the 6 prefectures. Shui Ziozhuo, who was then chief supervising secretary for the Ministry of Revenue, clearly saw the transfer of grains and silvers. Shui Ziozhuo turned back and muttered to himself, but Lu Guangbai did not die. Instead, he took the Bianjun commandery garrison troops with him and deserted. Qizuyan swiftly returned to defense mode, and Qidong remained impregnable. Your plan failed, so Amu'er transferred Hassan away and started to launch a major offensive against Libei. This was the entire gist of the Bianjun commandery's military grains case. Fu Man exhaled through his nostrils and swiveled his eyes around listlessly as he started to get all worked up. The leading factor in the Libei's military grains case was Weihuigu, who colluded with the Juexi officials to resell the grains to Zongbo for huge profits. In the process, they replaced Libei military grains with moldy grains, and this matter was exposed by the relay report from Yang Cheng. The report was originally meant to be submitted directly to the Ministry of Justice, but instead, it was sent to the Ministry of Revenue on its arrival at Chu capital. Both Xue Xiaozuo and Shen Zequan thought this to be a move to threaten Wei Huigu because at that time, Xiao Qiye kept his grip on the case and refused to let go, and they had to make a quick decision to cut their losses and kick Wei Huigu out. Only then could they ensure that the other scorpions hiding in Chu capital would not be implicated. In that case, who else was a part of these others apart from Fu Man? Fu Man's bloody palm scraped across the ground as he strained himself to scrawl in an attempt to tell Xue Xiaozuo something. Streaks of blood intersected on the ground, and his breathing gradually grew heavier. All of a sudden, he heard the door to the cell open. "Your Excellency," Feng Quan stood outside the door as per the regulations. The relay report said the defectors have arrived. The Grand Secretary and Her Majesty are both waiting in Mingli Hall for Your Excellency to head over for a discussion. As the cell was dimly lit and the hall was brighter, Feng Quan's bowing shadow crept into the cell and shrouded Fu Man. Fu Man looked as if he had been bitten by a snake, his tears and sweat flowing as he stared at Xue Xiaozuo's back. He parted his lips, but could make no sound. Feng Quan made way for Xue Xiaozuo. After the latter left, his gaze shifted back to Fu Man. Fu Man panted for breath heavily, his chest heaving. The corner of his lips was still drooling with clear fluid that could not be concealed. Feng Quan circled around him to size him up. When the cell door was shut tight, he kicked Fu Man with his foot. "What were you going to tell Xue Yanqing?" Feng Quan looked at the crisscross of bloodstains on the ground, and understanding dawned on him. "You wanted to write my name." Fu Man attempted to escape from Feng Quan's shadow, but he could not move. "Don't rush it." Feng Quan gripped Fu Man's wrist and led him to write on the ground, stroke by stroke. "Hush. Listen to me. Even if you tell him, he won't believe you. When the time is right, I will tell him myself. All clever people need such a lesson like this." Fu Man's entire arm was trembling. The bloodstains on the ground increased as Feng Quan stubbornly persisted in writing. Leading Fu Man, he turned a stroke in the feng that Fu Man had written into a crooked kill. "Hang in there," Feng Quan said in a feminine manner. "I will not treat you unjustly." *******. Tan Taihu finished the head count of his garrison troops, but he did not see Lu Kong, so he asked around, only to realize that Lu Kong had really gone missing. That son of a bitch had better not flee before the battle. Tan Taihu gripped the name roster. I must have been blind, putting in all my effort to nurture him. He waited for both sides to suffer casualties, but he didn't expect his lordship to have such incredible foresight. If he stays on any longer, he won't be able to make his escape. Seeing that no one else around, Yu Xiaoze whispered quietly to Tan Taihu, "When you report it to his lordship later, just say it as it is. Don't say a word more than necessary." It was only then that it hit Tan Taihu. He blurted in shock, "You're saying that Lu Kong is the spy? He fought battles too when he followed me to Duan province. Besides, as Qiao Tianya said, what's the point of him giving us the runs?" Unable to explain it, Yu Xiaoze simply said, "Just report it to his lordship as it is, and his lordship will understand. What I'm worried about now is that the traitor behind him will run too now that he has fled." Tan Taihu felt a chill run down his back. He took a few steps out, then backtracked and said quietly, "Tell me on the sly, so I know how things stand and prepare myself for it." The advisors all love to speak incisively in profound terms. If they don't say the name, I won't be able to guess it. I may have a bad temper and erred back in Dun province, but I don't think I have ever offended anyone. This crook has to have a reason for doing this to me. So Yu Xiaoze stretched out a finger to point to the south, looking to be in a spot. This, Sai. You just got caught in the crossfire. Officialdom was like a spider web where every thread and node was intricately connected. Any single promotion or dismissal could cause repercussions within its range. Yu Xiaozhe could not say it, for he had no evidence. If he spoke up rashly, he would be suspected of ostracizing fellow officials. Cha Province, which was under Luo Mu's charge, was the main gate to the trade route between Huai Province, Chse Province, and Cha Province. In the earliest days, Shenzhequan had no one under his command. As Cha Province's prefecture prefect, Luo Mu held the three powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, in hand, and no one other than the imperial cavalry censors could restrain him. In any work he did, he only had to send in a request document to ask Shenzhequan. He had no need to seek another's opinion. Over time, Shenzhequan would lose the eyes he left in Cha Province. As such, when Wang Xian, who came from the Ministry of Revenue, made his appearance, Shenzhequan immediately had him assigned to Cha Province. Wang Xian had the power and authority to administer the economy of Cha Province, and he took over the management of Cha Province's tax circuit intendants and taxation of the commoners' fields. This, in truth, had already split away Luo Mu's powers. Luo Mu wanted to take Wang Xian out of the game, but he could not impeach the latter or stir up trouble. The safest way was to strike at him by leveraging someone else's might. The Dun province Yamen bore ill will towards Tan Taihu. Tan Taihu was impulsive and prone to causing trouble, and he had no personal relationship with Luo Mu. Luo Mu arranged for Lu Kong to go over and planted him by Tan Taihu's side. It just so happened that Wang Xian had to make arrangements for the military grains. When both encountered each other, no doubt a dispute would arise. Tan Taihu was also Xiao Qiye's trusted aide, and Wang Xian could not afford to offend him, so he could only take the matter to Shenzhequan. Were Shenzhequan to probe into the matter, he would be probing the Dun province Yamen and Tan Taihu, which had nothing at all to do with Luo Mu. With this move, Luo Mu could plant his own man in the Dun province garrison troops and at the same time, make Wang Xian lose Shenzhequan's favor. What was the relationship between Xiao Qiye and Shenzhequan? If Wang Xian insisted on stirring up trouble with Tan Taihu, he would be putting both the prefectural lord and second master in a predicament. Shenzhequan assigned Yu Xiaozhe to supervise the army, and Yu Xiaozhe was an official from Chu capital. If Yu Xiaozhe were to mess things up in the Dun province garrison troops, he would become a spy in collusion with Chu capital. Then Wang Xian, who was similarly an official from the capital, would surely be implicated. This was called striking a cow from the other side of the mountain. This matter was initially a done deal, but Xiao Changbi proved to be a stroke of bad luck. Luo Mu himself probably did not expect that the viceroy that the Chu capital had carefully selected was here to throw his life away. Long before the capital command troops came attacking, Lu Kong sensed Yu Xiaozhe watching him, so of course, he would seize his opportunity during the chaos to run once the battle started. Quick, go and inform his lordship. Yu Xiaozhe lifted the hem of his robe and walked toward the other end. I have to ask Fei Sheng if the Jinyi Wei set up in Cha province have been withdrawn. Fei Sheng was in the midst of having his meal. After hearing Yu Xiaozhe's question, he replied in puzzlement as he held his bowl in his hands, of course, they had been withdrawn. At that time, when his lordship went over to Duan province, he wanted to establish the imperial cavalry. We don't have enough manpower, and there's you to supervise the various regions Yamen. So my men were all withdrawn. Yu Xiaozhe promptly exclaimed in shock, his face turning pale as he said, oh no, Lao Fei, this is bad. Asterisk. Shui Xiaozhuo braved the rain to make his way over to Mingli Hall. When he entered, he saw everyone wearing a myriad of expressions. News came in earlier. Sen Yu gestured for Shui Xiaozhuo to look at the letter. Luo Mu of Cha province brought along 20,000 garrison troops to defect to us. I suspect it's a trap Shenzhequan laid, Kong Chiu said. Why would Luomu take such a risk instead of remaining in his position as the prefectural prefect of Cha province? Firstly, because of the imperial court's reward of 1 million, Chen Zhen said. And secondly, because he is sincerely loyal to the state. He was forced to submit to the rebels against his own will. From what he said in the letter, he already had the intent to switch allegiances a long time ago. However, Shen Zequin had misgivings about him, and that was why it was only until today that he dared to risk his life to come to the state's rescue. The garrison troops from Hubei province are still on the way. Li Jianting stood beside her desk. If Luomu is already on his way, then going by the timing, he will arrive a few days later. Dan City is already lost to us. Assemble the remaining capital command troops, Xue Ziuzhuo said. Together with the men Luomu brought with him, we still have 30,000 soldiers. Qi Ziyan wants to betray the state. Sure. Grand Secretary, please write a letter to Qi Shiu and ask him if he wants to turn traitor, too. He folded up the letter. Midway in his journey, Luomu can intimidate He province to make the Yan clan of He province hand over their remaining grains as well as cut off Shen Zequin's grains route. Without Cha province and He province, Shen Zequin would be no different from having an arm severed. We are lacking in grains, so his grains have to be depleted too. Now that the 90,000 armored cavalry soldiers have penetrated deep into the desert, for each day Xiao Qiye doesn't return, Shen Zequin will be hard-pressed to forge ahead. End chapter.